Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Hong Kong Horror. I'm your narrator, Simon. We all want a shortcut to riches in life, don't we? The secret back door to success. Maybe you see a guy speeding down the street in a brand new Lamborghini. Or maybe you're just doom scrolling on Facebook at 2 a.m. in the morning, and you come across a post from your high school bully, the guy who used to always knock your books out of your hand or make fun of you. Well, guess what? He's now married to a supermodel, living in a massive mansion, living the dream. Meanwhile, you're sitting there in your underwear in a rented rundown apartment, wondering where it all went wrong. You look at that and think, why isn't that me instead? That's not fair. It stings, right? This happens to everyone to some extent. But what if I told you that sometimes these so-called riches can come with a heavy cost? Would you still want it? High risk, high reward is a common saying. For the most part, it's true. It will sound tempting, but also realize that in this world, if something sounds too good to be true, the price you pay isn't always monetary. Sometimes, it's something much more expensive that money can never buy. Tonight, we're heading south, deep into the humid, chaotic streets of Jakarta, Indonesia. This story made its way around the internet, so there are a few slight variations of this particular incident floating around the darker corners of the web, so you might have heard some version of it before, but I think that most of you have not. It comes from a man. Let's call him Ken. At the time, Ken worked in the cutthroat world of medical device sales in Jakarta. It's a story about taking a shortcut. Ken found out the hard way that when you invite something in to get ahead in life, you better make sure you know exactly who or what you're inviting in. As always, at the end of the episode, we'll take a deeper dive into this incident from Indonesia and break it down together from a Chinese cultural perspective to see if we can figure out exactly what happened here. So let's turn down the lights, get comfortable, and let's dive right into this one. Ken was in his late 30s when this incident happened to him. At the time, he worked as a sales rep for a company that sold high-end medical devices, MRI machines, surgical robots, the kind of hardware that costs a ton of money. He mainly worked with the medical businesses in Jakarta, but sometimes his job would take him out of the city. Most of Ken's life was spent stuck in the city's notorious traffic jams that could last for hours as he traveled to see potential clients. He spent his days sweating through his suit in hospital lobbies, waiting for arrogant doctors and corrupt procurement officers who wouldn't even look at him unless he had a bribe in hand. Selling a multi-million-dollar MRI machine isn't easy. The competition is fierce. Most days, Ken went home to his cramped apartment with 0 signed contracts and a migraine from inhaling all the exhaust fumes while sitting in traffic. The pressure from his regional manager was suffocating. Hit your quota or you're out. That was always the mantra. He started having anxiety, waking up with a cold sweat, terrified of his phone ringing. One evening, while venting over a beer at a side street bar, a friend of his, Rizky, leaned in. "Ken," Rizky whispered, looking around to make sure no one was listening. "You look like crap, man. You can't survive for much longer at this job if you don't make any sales soon. Have you ever thought about it? Getting some help? I don't mean like a loan shark or anything. I mean spiritual help." Intrigued, Ken looked at Rizky, signaling him to continue. Rizky told him about a hidden place tucked away in the alleys of an old Chinatown district. He said they had a very specific type of amulet, an imported takrut, or holy tube, that was famous for making salesmen persuasive, almost hypnotic. Now, Ken was a modern, university-educated guy. He didn't believe in ghosts or black magic or any of that crap. But desperation does funny things to a man's logic. He thought, what's the harm? Worst case, I lose a little bit of cash. So, he decided to check out the address that Rizky provided him. The location was deep in an old district, down a narrow alley that smelled of sewage, clove cigarettes, and frying oil. Next to a noodle stall, there was a rusted metal rolling gate, pulled halfway down. Ken double-checked the address to make sure he was really in the correct place. He was. He banged the metal gate. A few seconds later, the gate rattled up. An older-looking Indonesian man greeted him and invited him inside the shop. Inside, it was a totally different world. The humidity of Jakarta vanished, replaced by an air that was thick and heavy. One wall was lined with shelves packed with statues, Thai deities, Chinese gods, and things that looked older, darker. A couple sat behind a teak counter. They were overly friendly, smiling too wide, their teeth looking a little too yellow in the dim light. Ken felt a shiver run down his spine, a primal instinct telling him to run, to turn around and leave, to get the heck out of there and back to the safety of the traffic outside. The walls were covered in strange things, dried flowers, small vials of mysterious oils, and wood carvings that all looked like they were watching him. Hi. My friend told me about your services. I'm a salesman and I wanted to close deals, Ken said, his voice trembling slightly. He wasn't too sure how else to start this conversation, as it all felt so awkward. I need wealth. I need doctors to listen to me, he continued. The male owner nodded knowingly and reached under the counter. He pulled out a small, dark red glass tube. This, the owner said, his voice dropping to a whisper. This is what you will need. This is a very special amulet. It attracts people. It commands authority. It creates obsession. With this, no one will be able to resist whatever it is you're trying to sell them. The owner invited Ken to come closer to take a look. Ken walked up to the counter and took a closer look. Inside the glass tube, floating in the dark viscous oil, was a piece of rolled up material. It looked like some sort of leather, dark and textured, with tiny microscopic script written on it. This is a consignment piece from a dark arts master in northern Thailand, the owner whispered. I cannot simply sell it to you. The spirit inside must choose you. He reached under the counter and pulled out 2 red crescent-shaped wooden blocks, moon blocks. He placed them in Ken's hands. Go ahead, ask the spirit for permission, the owner said. Drop them. If they land one face up and one face down, the deal is done. You have permission to purchase it. If not, then you leave without the amulet. Intrigued, Ken agreed. He knelt on the dusty floor, his hands sweating. He held the red blocks tight, whispered a plea for wealth, and dropped them gently. Click-clack. One landed flat side up, the other round side up. A perfect balance, a definitive yes. Perfect, the owner said, excited. Then he chanted something in a language Ken didn't recognize. It sounded Thai, mixed with some other ancient language he's never heard before. He then sealed the amulet in a red cloth and handed it over. The price for this amulet shocked Ken. It was nearly the equivalent of about $2,000. That was a lot of money, but Ken, desperate at this point in his career, felt like he had no other choice. He paid it, pretty much emptying his savings account. He needed a miracle. He also trusted Ritsky, as he's never steered him wrong before. This was his last chance to turn things around. Remember, the owner said, as he and Ken walked out of the shop, into the humid night, Amulet with the red cloth in hand. Keep the amulet in a safe place, and it will treat you well. And just like that, the owner went back inside and shut the metal rolling gate. It was instant. The moment Ken put the amulet into his suit pocket, he felt the energy shift. You know that feeling when you drink too much coffee and the blood is rushing to your head? It kind of felt like that. The next day, things seemed to turn around already for Ken. He had an appointment at a major private hospital. The head of surgery didn't make him wait at all in the lobby. That's never happened before. The doctor invited him in right away, even offered him tea, and listened to every single word Ken said with dilated eyes. It was as if Ken had become a hot saleswoman overnight. This doctor was gobbling up every word he was saying. It was like he couldn't get enough of Ken's talking. Ken almost couldn't believe what was happening. People who used to ignore his emails were suddenly calling him up to set up meetings. Procurement officers signed contracts for expensive MRI machines without even negotiating price. They only wanted to talk to Ken. In 3 days, he closed 2 massive deals. His commission was going to be astronomical. His manager was ecstatic. Ken felt invincible. He was pretty much set financially for the whole year. The pressure weighing on his shoulders was starting to disappear as the money was now coming in. But the darkness started to creep in slowly. On the 3rd night, the strange dreams started. They were extremely vivid. He dreamt of a woman crying. It was the sound of pure, jagged agony echoing in the tiled room. He couldn't see her face, just a blurred figure in the dark, sobbing. Why? Why did you do this to me? Ken kept having the same exact dream over and over again. Always the same woman, always the same scene, and she always said the same line. It was too vivid. You know how dreams normally fade once you wake up and you start forgetting about it minutes after waking? Not this dream. It was the exact opposite. Ken remembered every single detail of this dream, even after waking. As a matter of fact, he started remembering more and more detail the more he had this dream. On the 4th day, Ken was changing his shirt after a nice shower when he noticed something strange. Deep, dark purple bruises on his rib cage. 3 distinct marks, like he was struck or fell on something hard. He hadn't bumped into anything. He stared at the bruises in the bathroom mirror and then gently touched them. They burned. It felt fresh. On the 7th day, the smell arrived. It was faint at first, a sickly, salty odor of rotting meat. Ken thought maybe a rat had died in the AC unit, but then the smell followed him into the car. He had the car detailed, scrubbed the leather seats, poured bleach down the drains in his apartment, but the smell followed him everywhere he went. It was even in the VIP hospital wings while he was waiting to speak to doctors. He could smell it in his freshly pressed suits. It was literally everywhere he went, but he could never locate the source of the smell. Another strange thing was that it seemed like he was the only one that was able to smell this. He also noticed something else, something terrifying. The more contracts he signed, the stronger the smell of rotting flesh became, and the sharper his dreams became as well. Eventually, the blur resolved into a woman. She was kneeling on a dirty, blood-stained floor. Her skin was lacerated, covered in surgical cuts. Her mouth was torn open at the corners. She was screaming, but no sound came out, just a wet, gurgling rasp. Every time Ken fell asleep, this nightmare would come to him instantly. Ken stopped sleeping, not because he wanted to, but because he just couldn't fall asleep anymore, no matter how exhausted he was. He became gaunt, his eyes sunken, his skin turning a waxy yellow like a patient with liver failure. He looked like a walking corpse, but his sales were currently higher than anyone in his company's history. He was a superstar right now, and he was loving every second of it. The breaking point came a few days after the closing of the biggest deal of his career. Ken was off from work that day. He walked to his car in an underground parking lot of a luxury mall in central Jakarta. He was spending some of his newfound money on fancy designer handbags and luxury clothes for himself. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering. He unlocked his door. Thump. A sound from inside the car. He froze. He peered through the tinted windows. Empty. Get a grip, Ken, he muttered, wiping the sweat from his forehead. Old piece of crap car. I'll replace it soon with a brand new Mercedes, he told himself. He got in, started the engine, and adjusted the rearview mirror. His heart stopped. In the mirror, sitting directly in the middle of the back seat, was a black, solid shadow. It had the shape of a person, but no features, just a void where a face should have been. Ken screamed and whipped his head around. The back seat was totally empty. He turned back to the front, hyperventilating, and then, right next to his ear, a wet, cold voice whispered, "Why?" Ken squirmed out of instinct and swatted his hands to his ear, the same reaction we all get when we hear a mosquito flying right next to our ear. But there was nothing there. Ken slammed on the gas. He drove home in a panic, weaving through the late-night traffic, reciting every prayer he knew, his hands shaking so hard he could barely hold the steering wheel straight. That night, Ken didn't turn off the lights. He played Buddhist chants on his phone, trying to drown out the silence of his apartment. He kept telling himself that it was all in his head. He's been working extremely hard lately, closing major deals. He's just overworked. It was nothing. Exhaustion finally took him under. He drifted into that heavy, paralyzed state between sleep and waking. Suddenly, half asleep and half awake, Ken felt it. The mattress he was laying on dipped, as if someone had sat on the edge of his bed. Ken's eyes snapped open. The light he had left on were gone. The room was pitch black. He tried to move, but his body wouldn't listen. Sleep paralysis. He felt a weight slowly crawl up his legs, up his chest. A face hovered inches from his. He could smell it. That overwhelming stench of rotting biological waste. A cold, clammy hand clamped around his throat. Another hand pressed down hard on his stomach, pressing deep into his intestines. "It hurts," the voice moaned, dripping with pain. "It hurts." The coldness from the hand on his stomach was unbearable, like a block of ice sitting on him, freezing him. Ken struggled, mentally screaming, forcing all of his will on his little finger. "Move! Move!" Finally, after what felt like 30 minutes or so of struggling, he jolted awake, gasping for air, rolling off the bed and slamming onto the floor. He scrambled to the light switch. Click. The room was empty. The chanting music he left on earlier was still playing on his phone. But when Ken lifted his shirt, there, on his stomach, fresh and purple, was the perfect imprint of a hand. Ken couldn't take it anymore. He called in sick the next day and rescheduled all of his appointments with clients. He grabbed the amulet, wrapped it back in the red cloth it came in, and drove straight back to the shop where he got it from. He was going to return it. He needed some answers. He ran down the alley, splashing through the puddles of dirty water, turning the corner to the noodle stall. He stopped dead. The metal gate of the shop was fully down, covered in a thick layer of dust. A bright yellow sign was pasted across it, "For rent." Ken stood there, his mind reeling. "No, I was just here 2 weeks ago." He banged on the metal door, just like he did last time. Hollow echoes. He peered through the mail slot. Empty. No statues, no counter, just a bare concrete room with peeling paint. The noodle stall owner poked his head out of his shop. "You looking for the couple?" "Yes," Ken shouted. "Where'd they go?" "Gone," the man said, stirring his walk. "Skipped town in the middle of the night a week ago. Very hurried. I bet they owed money to the wrong people. Or maybe they were running from something else. God knows what they did in there." but I bet you it was shady stuff. Ken quietly walked back to his car, defeated. He was still holding the amulet, and the sellers had vanished. There was no way he was ever going to find them again. For 2 days, Ken slept in his car. He was too afraid to go home. He locked the amulet in the glove compartment, but sometimes he could hear scratching sounds coming from the car, all over, like fingernails on metal. On the 3rd day, aimless and terrified, he was just mindlessly driving through the outskirts of the city, just trying to clear his head near the coast. He passed by an old, traditional Chinese temple. It wasn't a famous landmark or anything like that. Just a local community temple dedicated to Guanggong, the god of war and justice. As the car passed the main gate with its ornate dragons, the engine suddenly died. Ken turned the key. Click. Click. Nothing. Defeated and exhausted, he looked out the window at this temple. The incense smoke, wafting out, felt warm and comforting for some strange reason, not like the choking smoke at most shrines. As I mentioned before, Ken is not superstitious, so he doesn't normally go into temples. But today felt like it was a sign. He grabbed the amulet from the glove compartment and walked into the temple courtyard. An old temple keeper saw him enter. The old man's face went pale instantly. "Young man," the keeper said, "you're being followed closely." Ken burst into tears. The keeper approached Ken gently and sat him down on a wooden bench. "It's all right, young man. It's all right. I understand. Don't worry. Why don't you come with me?" The old temple keeper escorted Ken deeper into the temple grounds, over to where an old woman was knelt in front of a statue of Guanggong, praying. As Ken and the old man approached, the old woman looked up. "I've been expecting you," the old woman said to Ken, gently. Ken looked at her, confused. The old woman pointed her wrinkly finger at Ken. "Bring her out." Ken had no idea what she was talking about, but he assumed she wanted to see the amulet that he was holding in his hand. He placed the red bundle on the offering table in front of the old lady. The old lady frowned, recoiling slightly, before returning her gaze to Ken. "You ignorant child. You carry a great grievance. This is not a holy object. This is a prison. Do you even know what you're carrying?" The old woman then spoke to the temple keeper. "We must hear her story. Let her borrow your body as a temporary vessel." The old man nodded, as if this was something normal, as if this was something they've done 1,000 times before. She performed the ritual, forcing the spirit inside the amulet to speak through the body of this old temple keeper. The temperature in the temple dropped. The temple keeper slumped forward, then began to weep in a woman's voice. It was the same sobbing Ken had heard so many times before in his dreams. "Why?" the temple keeper wept, the voice high and feminine. "Why did you skin me? What did I ever do to you?" Under the questioning of the old woman, the horrific truth came out. The spirit was once a woman named Nam. She was a young woman who lived in rural Thailand years ago. She was gifted, and she was kind. She was not a professional shaman or anything like that, but her supernatural gifts were well known in her village. She helped a lot of people remove curses for free. But a medium from her village, jealous of her power and angry that Nam was taking business away from him, hired a local criminal group to drug and kidnap her. While she was still alive, paralyzed, but feeling everything, this local medium had skinned her. He took the patches of her skin, inscribed it with a curse to seal her soul in, and rolled them into little glass tubes to sell as black magic amulets to greedy foreigners in Indonesia, Thailand, and Taiwan. He trapped parts of her soul inside her own skin, binding her to the vials, forcing her to slave away for whoever owned it. She wasn't haunting Ken because she was evil. She was haunting him because she was in eternal, agonizing pain. Ken fell to his knees once he heard this. I'm so sorry, he sobbed. I didn't know. I'm just a nobody. I just wanted to sell some medical equipment to make a simple living. I didn't know it cost you your life. The old woman spoke gently to the spirit. Nam, your suffering is great, but this man was merely a tool of your murderer. The one who killed you is already rotting from the inside. His karma has found him. He will not survive the year. If you continue to hurt this man, the old woman said, you become no better than your killer. Please, let go of your rage. I will help free you here. I will clear the path for you to move on, child. The weeping stopped. A heavy sigh filled the room. It hurts, she whispered, but I am so tired. The old woman picked up a wooden sword used in rituals and struck the table with it. Crack! On the altar, the glass vial exploded. The oil spilled out, and the rolled leather skin uncurled. The old woman proceeded with a ritual that lasted for what felt like an hour or so. When she had finished, this old woman collapsed into her chair as if she had just ran a marathon. She was sweating and out of breath. The air in the temple instantly became warm again. After this whole ordeal, when Ken returned to the car, the engine started again smoothly on his first try. Ken burned paper offerings for Nam for 3 days. He also donated a significant amount of money he had made from his recent sales to the temple in her name for them to continue praying for her. The nightmares went away. Slowly, his health returned. The bruises faded. The smell vanished. Though his sales did drop back to his normal levels, he was no longer a top earner. He struggled to get appointments again, but he was perfectly fine with that. He realized that the strange amulet didn't give him charisma. It was using a tortured ghost to hypnotize people. So the next time you feel stuck in life, or you feel like everyone else is getting ahead while you're stuck and stagnant, just remember Ken. Remember that sometimes the fast lane doesn't always lead to the finish line. It just might lead you straight off a cliff. You're doing great. Be proud of yourself, of how far you came all on your own. Keep going at your own pace. Stop comparing yourself to others, and trust that the slow path is always the safest one. Alright, Hong Kong horror family, let's take a breath. You know what I'm going to ask next, right? What do you think happened here to Ken? Please pause the video here and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. That story was intense, right? But to really understand the horror of what Ken really went through, we have to look at this through the lens of traditional Chinese metaphysics. Because when you peel back the layers, this wasn't a true haunting. It was a transaction that Ken didn't even know he entered into. I want to break this down, exactly why Ken entered extremely dangerous territory where he could have lost his life. First off, Ken thought he was buying a lucky charm. In the West, you might think of a rabbit's foot or horseshoe, but in Chinese occultism, what he did is called yuan guai. Yuan means to raise or to feed. Guai means ghost. Let me be clear, this is black magic. It's extremely dangerous, so you should never touch this. But even with that said, this is a lot more common than you would think, especially in Southeast Asia. Ken wasn't buying an object, he was inviting a spirit into his life, and specifically, because this spirit was bound inside a container made of her own skin. This is a form of necromancy. The rule of Yuan Guai is simple. You provide the spirit, Yuan Hei, yang energy, your life force, and in exchange, the spirit uses its yin energy to manipulate the world for you. That's why Ken got sick. This is a classic sign of yang energy exhaustion, Yuan Hei Hou Zhen. You would think that since Ken purchased the amulet, he was the master. but in reality, he was just a battery. Next, do you remember the red wooden blocks? The moon blocks? When Ken threw the blocks and got one flat and one round, that's called Singbui, a holy cup, or a sacred answer. It pretty much means yes. Usually, we use these to ask gods for permission, but ghosts can answer blocks too. The shopkeeper didn't ask God if Ken was worthy. He asked the spirit in the tube, "Do you accept this man?" And Nam, the spirit, said yes. Not because she liked him, but because she was desperate for a host. She needed someone to feed off. Ken thought he was getting divine blessing, but he was actually signing a contract with a desperate, tortured soul who had no other choice. Then, there's the part about the doctors. Why were so many of them suddenly signing contracts without even negotiating? Why did they seem almost hypnotized by Ken? Well, in a sense, they kind of were. This is something we call my one. In Chinese folklore, ghosts don't give you charisma. They use a technique called my one, which literally means confusing the soul or bewitching. Mai means confuse, lost, and one means soul or mind, also known as Guaizean, which translates to ghost covering the eyes. Nam wasn't making Ken a better salesman. She was physically influencing the minds of the doctors. She was clouding their judgment, making them irrational, making them obsessed. Those doctors weren't seeing Ken. They were seeing an illusion created by a powerful, high-level spirit. This creates bad karma for the user. Ken was robbing them of their free will. And all that karmic debt, guess where that goes? Yep, it goes straight onto Ken's tab. This is why turning to this type of black magic is always extremely dangerous all around. Physically, mentally. It even affects your karma. Finally, let's talk about why the car died at the temple. Guanggong is not just the god of war. He's the embodiment of Jinghei, righteous energy. Think of him as the chief of police of the spirit world. Evil spirits, especially those involved in black magic, are usually terrified of him. When Ken's car died, I don't think it was a malfunction. I think it was divine intervention. In our culture, we believe that sometimes when you're heading toward a cliff, the gods will break your legs to stop you from walking over the edge. Guanggong stopped the car because Ken, who in general seems like a good person, was going down a dangerous path to eventually be fully consumed. The warmth that Ken felt at the temple, that was pure yang energy burning away the filth. And what about this old woman? This woman was definitely some type of medium. She foresaw Ken coming to the temple before he actually arrived. She also did something that might be new to some of you. She invited the spirit to speak through a human vessel. In Chinese folk religion, this is not demonic possession like in Western horror. This is called 借身, borrowing a body, or 請靈上身, inviting a spirit to enter. This is considered a controlled ritual practice, not something random or dangerous when done properly. She temporarily allowed the spirit to communicate through a vessel. The spirit is invited. The host keeps partial awareness, and there is usually a time limit for this kind of thing. It's kind of like letting someone use your phone to make a call while you're holding the phone. Spirits can't always speak clearly in our realm. They struggle to form sound, use objects, and communicate in full sentences where we would understand. They usually try to communicate by entering our dreams. If they're able to be invited into a temporary vessel, like in this case, it is much easier for them to tell their story. 借身 is totally different from evil possession, as it's much more controlled by the medium conducting the ritual. It's restricted by many boundaries, time limits, and consent. The spirit is treated like a guest and not an invader. So you might be wondering, what types of protection measures are there in a ritual like this? Great question. Before the spirit enters the temporary vessel, the practitioner uses a few things to act as guardrails. They use incense to invite only the correct entity into that body. They also use a combination of hand seals, talismans, and command phrases to prevent entry of other spirits that might be lurking in the area, or demons. It's also to help prevent attachment after the ritual. The practice of Jiesun is a lot more rare nowadays, as there are fewer and fewer trained mediums. This is also extremely dangerous if done wrong. A lot of the younger generations don't exactly go into this field nowadays, so it's a dying practice. But it still happens, usually in the more rural areas. So, what is the main takeaway in tonight's story? There's an old Chinese saying that sums this up perfectly. 命裏有時終須有，命裏無時莫強求. If it's in your destiny to have it, you will have it. If it is not in your destiny, don't force it. Ken tried to force destiny using dark means, and the universe pushed back. So the next time you see a shortcut, just remember Ken. Remember the bruises, and remember that the price tag isn't always in dollars. Thank you, Hong Kong Horror family, for making it all the way to this point in the video. I hope you enjoyed this week's story. Stay safe, and good night.